me?
Your Honor, may I ask the court a question before the trial begins?
You? Just because you crawled in here, stinking rat, you think you can do whatever you want?
Jasmine Brooks didn't sit. She stood even straighter.
My client deserves to be heard, Your Honor.
Caldwell's face went red. Veins rose on his neck.
If you win this case, I'll resign. Otherwise, you black rat, go back to your dirty sewers.
The courtroom erupted. Pearl clutched her niece's wrist, trembling. Jasmine remained unfazed. She picked up a file, pushed it across the table. Caldwell opened it. His face turned pale. Then she opened her mouth and spoke one single line. The courtroom went dead silent. When the sun set, this courtroom would belong to her. This is the story of how that courtroom went silent. To understand what happened in those next 5 seconds, you have to go back. 9 days earlier, before the courtroom, before the cameras, before anyone in that county had ever heard the name Jasmine Brooks. She lived above a shuttered hardware store on the edge of town, in a one-bedroom apartment with water-stained ceilings and a window that looked out on a parking lot. The walls were lined with law books, not new ones, not the kind you buy for show, old ones with cracked spines and yellowed margins. Each one bore the same inscription in faded blue ink on the inside cover. Property of Theo Brooks, Esquire. Above her desk, a single framed photograph. A tall black man in a gray suit standing on the steps of the United States Supreme Court. He was smiling at someone just out of frame. He had been 38 years old when that picture was taken. He would be dead 7 months later. Next to the photograph, taped to the wall with the corners curling, was a certificate she had received 4 months earlier from the State Bar of California. It was unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what it was. To Jasmine, it was a key. Certified Law Student. Practical Training of Law Students Program, Rule 9.42. It meant that under the supervision of a licensed attorney, she could appear in a real courtroom, argue real motions, cross-examine real witnesses. She was 19 years old. She had been waiting for this her entire life. 2 miles away at 1402 Honey Ridge Road, her grandmother was making breakfast. Pearl Brooks was 82 years old. She had lived in that house for 60 years, beneath a massive peach tree her late husband had planted the year their son was born. The land had been in the family longer than the house. Pearl's great-grandfather had bought the parcel in 1922 with money he had saved over 14 years of sharecropping wages. Wages so small that the men who paid them used to laugh and call the savings the impossible dollar. He had bought it in cash, free and clear, and every generation since had held it. It was the last block in the county still owned by descendants of formerly enslaved families. Every other parcel, every single one, had been sold, condemned, foreclosed, or quietly transferred over the past 3 decades. Honey Ridge Road was the last name on the map. Pearl knew this. She had stopped pretending she didn't. Under the floorboards in her bedroom, inside a rusted tin box wrapped in oilcloth, was the original 1922 deed. She had not opened that box in 12 years, not since her son had died. Across town, Judge Harold Caldwell was finishing his second cup of coffee in chambers paneled in dark mahogany. The walls were covered in framed photographs. Caldwell with 3 different governors, Caldwell at hunting lodges, Caldwell shaking hands at ribbon cuttings. He had been on the bench for 22 years. He was not, in the small ways that count, an obvious villain. He coached Little League. He brought donuts to his clerks on Fridays. He genuinely believed he was a guardian of orderly progress in a county he loved. He told himself this often, the way men do when they need a story to fall asleep at night. On the corner of his desk, beneath a glass paperweight, sat a thank you card on heavy cream stock. It was signed in elegant cursive. With continued gratitude, V. Halverson. Caldwell didn't look at it. He didn't need to. He knew it was there. And 6 blocks away, in a cramped office above a bakery, Eleanor Hastings was on her cell phone. She was 61 years old, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, and the last law partner Theo Brooks had ever worked with before he died. Pearl Brooks was her client. Halverson Development Group had filed an eminent domain petition to seize 1402 Honey Ridge Road for what they called a regional commerce corridor. The same firm had quietly acquired 22 surrounding parcels at 38 cents on the dollar over 4 years. Pearl's land was the last piece they needed. The hearing was in 9 days. "Pearl, listen to me," Eleanor said into the phone, walking out toward her car in the parking lot. "We are going to win this. I found something. I just need to—" The screech of tires, the crunch of metal, the phone clattered against the asphalt. Then, silence. The phone call had ended at 9:42 that night. Pearl Brooks heard the screech, the crunch, the silence. She heard a man's voice in the distance shouting, "She's down! Somebody call 911!" And then the sound of someone picking up Eleanor's phone, looking at it for a moment, and switching it off. By midnight, Pearl was in the hospital waiting room with Jasmine beside her, watching the doors to the trauma bay swing open and closed. The doctor came out at 2 a.m. Eleanor was alive. Barely. A pickup truck had run her down in the parking lot and kept driving. Skull fracture, internal bleeding, medically induced coma. The police took a statement. They were polite. They used the words tragic and "we'll do everything we can." 2 days later, the case was filed as hit-and-run driver unknown and assigned to a detective with 31 open files. While Eleanor lay in the ICU, somebody broke into her office. The lock wasn't forced. Somebody had a key or had been let in. They took her computer. They took 3 filing cabinets. They took the calendar off her wall. The police called it kids. Jasmine spent the next morning walking through the wreckage, dust on her shoes, glass crunching softly underfoot. She wasn't looking for what was missing. She was looking for what they had left behind. She found it on the top shelf, where Eleanor kept her old reference texts. A fat copy of Black's Law Dictionary, leather-bound with a slim manila folder tucked between pages 1402 and 1403. The label on the folder, in Eleanor's handwriting, Brooks Backup. She took the folder home and spread its contents across the floor of her apartment because the kitchen table wasn't big enough. There were 43 names, 43 black families, 43 parcels of land across 3 counties, every one of them sold or condemned over the past 19 years. She started a wall, index cards, a roll of masking tape, a red marker. 1 name per card, 1 parcel per card, 1 date per card. By 3 a.m., the wall was full. By 6 a.m., she could see the pattern. In every single case, the seller had been either elderly, sick, behind on property taxes, or had been hauled into Harold Caldwell's court on what looked like an unrelated petition, a code violation, an inheritance dispute, a boundary disagreement. In every single case, within months of that court appearance, the property had been voluntarily transferred, below market value, to one of 9 shell companies. All 9 shell companies traced back, eventually, to Halverson Development Group. The average sale price across all 43 transactions? 38 cents on the dollar. She pulled up the families on social media. 3 had moved out of state. 8 of the elders had passed away within 2 years of selling. 1 woman, 81 years old, lived now in a subsidized apartment in a town 200 miles from her birthplace. In a video on her granddaughter's page, she sat on the edge of a single bed holding a small mason jar of soil. "That's from my mama's garden," she said into the camera, smiling at it. "It's all I could carry when they moved me out." Jasmine watched it 3 times. The second time, she cried. The third time, she did not. The next afternoon, Pearl collapsed. She was watering the peach tree. The hose slipped from her hand. Jasmine found her on her knees in the grass, conscious but pale, one hand pressed flat against her chest. The ER doctor's word was hypertensive crisis.
Blood pressure 218 over 124. Stress, he said gently, was killing her grandmother in slow motion. She needs calm. She needs rest. She needs to not be fighting a lawsuit. Jasmine sat beside the hospital bed that night. Pearl's eyes were closed, but she was awake. Her hand was warm in Jasmine's hand. Outside in the hallway, a fluorescent light buzzed and flickered. "Baby," Pearl said, without opening her eyes, "I want to tell you something."
Grandma, you should rest. I want to tell you something. Jasmine waited. That land, Pearl said, is the only thing your daddy ever asked me to hold for him. He came home from his office one night, the week before he died, and he sat at my kitchen table, and he held both my hands. He said, "Mama, if anything ever happens to me, do not let them have that land. They are trying to take it from people like us, and I think I know why." A pause. Pearl's breath was thin. 3 days before he died, he went down to the county recorder's office. He would not tell me what for. They said his heart gave out. I never believed that, Jasmine. I have never believed that. Not for one day. She opened her eyes finally and looked at her granddaughter. "If we lose that land, baby, we lose your daddy twice." Jasmine called every black attorney within 100 miles. There were few. Fewer still would take a case against Halverson and Caldwell in the same breath. She got into her car and drove to 3 of them in person. The first one was kind. He brought her coffee. He listened for 20 minutes and then he set his cup down very carefully and said, "Sweetheart, I have to practice in front of Judge Caldwell every single month. I am 63 years old. I have a daughter in medical school. I cannot afford to make that man my enemy. And I am sorry. I am genuinely, deeply sorry." The second one didn't bring coffee. He didn't even let her sit down. "Scheduling conflict," he said, glancing at a calendar that, over his shoulder, Jasmine could clearly see was mostly empty. The third one looked her in the eye and offered to broker a settlement. 80 cents on the dollar. Maybe 90 if I push. Your grandmother walks away with something. Take the win, kid." Jasmine drove home with her hands tight on the steering wheel. The Brooks family had $11,000 in savings. Pearl's blood pressure medication was $400 a month. Property tax was due in 6 weeks. Eleanor was still in a coma. And the only man in the county with the power to stop Halverson was the same man taking Halverson's money. When she walked back into her apartment that evening, there was a certified letter waiting under her door. She already knew the return address. Halverson Development Group, LLC. The letter was 2 paragraphs long. The first offered a final and generous settlement of 42 cents on the dollar. The second informed her that the offer would expire in 9 days. After that, the firm intended to pursue our rights under eminent domain statute with all vigor available to us under the law. She set the letter down on the kitchen counter. She did not cry. She did not call anyone. She just stood there for a long time in the middle of her own apartment, looking at the photograph of her father on the steps of the Supreme Court. "I want you to feel this. 19 years old. Grandma in the hospital. No lawyer. No money. Every adult telling her to walk away. That is where most people quit. That is where she chose to fight." That night, after Pearl fell asleep, Jasmine stood at the visitor's lounge window with her phone in her hand. She had pulled up the photo of her father on the Supreme Court steps. She looked at it a long time. Then she closed it. She did not pray. She did not call anyone. She took out a yellow legal pad and a black pen, and she wrote 3 words at the top of the page in block letters. "I will appear." The next morning at 8 a.m., she was sitting in the office of Eleanor Hastings's senior partner, a woman named Patricia Devlin, who had not seen Jasmine since she was 12 years old. Devlin listened for 19 minutes. Then she opened her desktop, pulled up a state bar form, and began to type. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, a one-page document was filed with the Superior Court. It authorized Jasmine Brooks, certified law student under California Rule 9.42, to appear as supervised counsel of record for Pearl Brooks in the matter of Halverson Development Group v. Brooks. Caldwell would receive the filing the next morning. If he read it carefully, he would understand exactly what Jasmine Brooks was, a law student with the legal right to stand at a defense table and try a case. He did not read it carefully. That afternoon, Jasmine carried the Brooks backup folder into the back room of Eleanor's office and sat down under a single desk lamp. She started turning pages. The folder held more than just the 43 names. It held parcel deeds, tax records, bank deposit slips, photocopies of court dockets going back 19 years. 3 of the names, 3 out of 43, had been circled in red marker. Beside each circle, in Eleanor's tight, slanted handwriting, were the same 2 letters, D.A., and clipped to the inside of the folder, on a yellow post-it that had gone slightly faded at the edges, 4 words, "Ask Doris. She knows." Jasmine did not know who Doris was. She set the post-it aside and kept reading. By 6 p.m. she had a pad full of notes. By 9 p.m., she had pulled down every reference book Eleanor owned. She read the federal eminent domain cases first. Then she went deeper into California's own Code of Civil Procedure, Section 1240, what the state can and cannot take, from whom, and on what showing of public necessity. Then, deeper still, into the anti-collusion statutes that governed what private developers could and could not do in concert with public officials, into the California Code of Judicial Ethics, Canon 3E, which required a judge to step off any case in which he had a direct or indirect financial interest. She read that one twice, then a third time. She marked it with a paperclip and set the book on top of her growing pile. By midnight, the pile was 13 books high. The next 8 days became a blur of paper and coffee and silence. Jasmine slept 3 hours a night in 2 shifts. She kept a thermos of black coffee on the corner of Eleanor's desk and refilled it 3 times a day. Pearl brought her toast at 3 a.m. one morning, set it down without a word, and left. She drafted a motion to dismiss the eminent domain petition on grounds of insufficient public benefit. 22 pages, single-spaced. She rewrote it 4 times. She drafted a motion for discovery, wide, aggressive, specifically requesting all financial communications between Halverson Development Group and any sitting public official in the county over the past 5 years. And then she drafted a third motion, which she did not put in the same folder as the other 2. She kept it separate, in a manila envelope inside her bag, on a single sheet, with 3 blank lines at the top for a docket number she would fill in later. A motion for judicial recusal. She did not file it. She did not intend to file it. Yet. She rehearsed her opening statement in the bathroom mirror. The first time her voice cracked. The second time she sounded angry. Caldwell would use that against her. The third time she found something quieter than either. The voice of someone who had read every page and was going to say what was on them. She memorized Canon 3E word for word. She memorized her case citations. She memorized the names of every member of the California Judicial Performance Commission, in case she had to file with them on short notice. The whole place began to look like a war room. The back wall of Eleanor's office was a flowchart of names. Pearl's dining table was buried under photocopies. The car ran on a quarter tank for 3 days because Jasmine kept forgetting to stop for gas. On the 8th night, 2 nights before the hearing, Pearl came to see her in Eleanor's office. She was carrying a rusted tin box. "I think it's time," Pearl said. She set the box on the corner of the desk. Jasmine recognized it. She had grown up hearing about it. She had never seen it open. Pearl unlatched the lid. Inside, beneath the original 1922 deed wrapped in oilcloth, was a sealed envelope.
The handwriting on the front was her father's. For Jasmine, when she is ready.
Pearl looked at her granddaughter for a long moment. Then she took her hand. "He left this for you 12 years ago," she said. "I wasn't sure when ready was. I think we are past sure now." She kissed Jasmine on the forehead, picked up the empty box, and walked out of the office. Jasmine sat alone with the envelope for a full minute before she opened it. It was not a love letter. It was a roadmap. Theo Brooks had been investigating for nearly 2 years before he died. The pages were typed on his old office letterhead, dense with citations and dates. He had mapped a network: public officials, private developers, shell companies, judicial rulings. He had pulled threads in 3 counties. He had names. On the last page, at the bottom, written by hand in his careful capital letters, were 3 lines. Caldwell, judicial, confirmed. Halverson, developer, confirmed. Massachusetts County, unconfirmed. Need DA. The third name had been crossed out in heavy black ink. Whatever it had said, Theo had been unsure enough, or careful enough, to redact it from his own notes. Jasmine touched the page where his signature would have been if he had finished. There was no signature. He had run out of time. She did not cry. She had cried enough. She folded the letter carefully along its creases, slid it into the inside pocket of her father's old leather briefcase, and turned off the desk lamp. The hearing was in 36 hours. She did not sleep that night. She went home to her apartment at 11 p.m., let herself in, and almost didn't see it. A plain manila envelope slid halfway under her door. No name on the front. No return address, no stamp. Someone had walked it up the stairs and put it there by hand. She stood in the hallway for a long moment looking at it. Then she went inside, washed her hands at the kitchen sink, put on a pair of dish gloves she kept under the counter, and picked it up. Inside the envelope were 9 pages. The first 3 were photocopies of bank wire transfer records. The originating account? Halverson Development Group, LLC. The receiving account? A Nevada-registered limited liability company called Ridgecrest Heritage Trust. The next 4 pages were corporate filings from the state of Nevada. They were dense and dry and full of legal boilerplate. But on the back of the second filing, on a page most people would have flipped past, there was a single line that named the sole beneficiary of Ridgecrest Heritage Trust, Margaret Caldwell. Jasmine read that name 3 times to be sure. She did not blink. She walked over to the kitchen table, sat down, and opened her laptop. She did not call anyone. She did not text anyone. She pulled up the public docket of the Superior Court of California and began comparing dates. 3 previous eminent domain cases. 3 previous rulings in favor of Halverson Development Group. 3 previous transfers of land at 38 cents on the dollar. She wrote each ruling date in her own handwriting on a yellow legal pad. Then she wrote the wire transfer dates beside them. The first ruling, April 8, 3 years ago. The first wire transfer, April 26th of the same year, 18 days later. The second ruling, August 4, 2 years ago. The second wire transfer, August 28, 24 days later. The third ruling, January 15, 18 months ago. The third wire transfer, February 13, 29 days later. Every single transfer had landed inside the same trust, in the name of the judge's wife, within 30 days of a ruling her husband had handed down. She wrote the dates a second time, by hand, just to be sure. Then she did it a third time. The math was the math. She closed her laptop. She stood up. She walked to the kitchen sink and poured herself a glass of water. Her hand was steady. It was 1:14 a.m. She had no intention of going to bed. She could file an ethics complaint right now. By morning, it would be on the desk of the Judicial Performance Commission. By noon, somebody would leak it to the local paper. By 5 p.m., Caldwell would have a press conference. A lawyer,
and a story about a disgruntled law student who had fabricated documents to extort a sitting judge. The complaint would survive, eventually, after investigations, after hearings, after years. Pearl did not have years.
Jasmine sat back down at the kitchen table and thought it through one more time.
Then she did something different.
She picked up her phone and called the main line of the California Attorney General's Public Integrity Division. She left a voicemail 4 minutes long. Calm, specific. Names, dates, dollar amounts, file numbers. She uploaded every page of the envelope's contents to the AG's secure tip portal. She attached her bar certification documents. She listed the time and place of the hearing scheduled for the following morning. And at the very end of the voicemail, she said one final thing. I respectfully request a federal observer in the courtroom at 9 a.m. tomorrow.
Then she hung up.
At 8:48 the next morning, the doors of the county courthouse opened. The gallery filled fast. 3 reporters from the regional papers, 2 from the local TV affiliate, 4 men in matching gray suits who worked for Halverson Development Group, a scattering of curious onlookers drawn by the docket notice, come to see what would happen to the elderly black woman trying to keep her land. In the back row, 4 older black neighbors sat in silence. They had not been asked to come. They came anyway. Pearl walked in at 8:54, leaning lightly on Jasmine's arm. They took the defense table together. Pearl arranged her hands in her lap and looked at no one. At opposing counsel's table sat 3 attorneys. The lead chair belonged to Bradford Whitfield, 60 years old, silver hair cut to the millimeter, a tie that cost more than Jasmine's car. He glanced at the defense table and smiled the way a man smiles when he is not threatened. Judge Caldwell entered at 9 exactly. All rise. Caldwell took the bench. He shuffled his papers, slid his glasses down his nose, and looked over them with the expression he reserved for tour groups. Counsel, if you can even call yourself that, what is your opening? Whitfield, at his table, did not bother to hide his smirk. Jasmine stood up. She did not look at her notes. She looked directly at Judge Harold Caldwell and spoke her first words on the record in a calm, measured voice that carried to the back of the room. Your Honor, before opening statements, the defense respectfully moves the court to disclose any direct or indirect financial relationship between the bench and Halverson Development Group, pursuant to Canon 3E of the California Code of Judicial Ethics. The courtroom went dead silent. 5 full seconds. A pen dropped somewhere in the gallery. Nobody picked it up. Caldwell's face did not move, but his right hand, which had been hovering casually above the bench, settled flat against the wood. Slowly, deliberately. At opposing counsel's table, Bradford Whitfield's smile did not return. Caldwell finally laughed. It was a small laugh, a practiced one. Counsel, this is a courtroom, not a stage. We do not entertain fishing expeditions or political theater in my chambers. The motion is denied. Sit down. He brought the gavel down, hard. The sound cracked through the room. Jasmine did not sit down. Your Honor, I respectfully request that the denial be entered on the record. It is on the record, counsel. The bench reporter records everything, including the embarrassment of an attorney too inexperienced to know when she is lost. Caldwell waved a hand. Move on. In the gallery, 2 reporters were now writing. Quickly, the pen that had dropped earlier, somebody picked it up. Bradford Whitfield's smile was gone. He whispered something to his second chair. The second chair did not whisper back. Jasmine sat down. Slowly. She did not look beaten. She did not look angry. She had the expression of someone who had just been given exactly the answer she had expected, by exactly the person she had expected to give it. She turned a page in her binder. Whitfield called his first witness. His name was Gerald Hutchins, the chief land use planner for Halverson. He had testified in eminent domain proceedings 48 times in the past decade. He sat in the witness chair as a man sits in his own living room. He spoke for 40 minutes about the regional commerce corridor, the 3,000 jobs it would create, the $890 million in economic uplift the county would see in the first decade, and the urgent public necessity of acquiring the final parcel at 1402 Honey Ridge Road. Then Jasmine stood up. "Mr. Hutchins, you testified that this project will create 3,000 jobs." "That is correct." "You are aware that Halverson Development Group is a publicly traded company, are you not?" "I am." "Then you are also aware of the company's most recent 10K filing with the Securities and Exchange Commission?" A pause. Yes. Generally, the defense submits as Exhibit B the 10K filing for the last fiscal year. She handed copies to the bench and to opposing counsel. "Page 22, line 4. Could you read aloud the projected job creation for this development as represented to your shareholders?" Hutchins took the document. He looked at the page for a long moment. 640, he said quietly. "Could you repeat that, sir?" 640 jobs. So when you told this court 3,000, and when you told your own shareholders 640, which of those numbers is the lie? "Objection!" Whitfield was on his feet. "Sustained," Caldwell said quickly. "Counsel, you will rephrase." "Withdrawn, Your Honor." But the question had already been asked. For the rest of the morning, Whitfield objected 16 times. Caldwell sustained 16 times. Every motion Jasmine raised was denied. Every exhibit she offered was held in abeyance pending further review. By the lunch recess, the docket reflected a complete defeat for the defense. But when Pearl Brooks stood up to leave the courtroom, an old man in the back row, bald, in a thin gray suit, shoes resoled twice, rose from his seat, removed his hat, and held it against his chest as she walked past. Pearl saw it. So did the reporter from the second row. Jasmine saw something else. She saw Bradford Whitfield at his table, watching that old man too. And for the first time all morning, Whitfield looked uncertain. She walked out into the parking lot at 6 p.m. with her father's briefcase under her arm. The afternoon had gone no better than the morning. Whitfield was already drafting the seizure order. Her front left tire was cut clean through, a single deep slash. The back tires were untouched, not an attempt to hurt her, a message. She photographed the cut and walked 4 miles home in the dark. When she reached her apartment, a thick padded envelope was waiting under her door. She put gloves on. Inside were $40,000 in banded hundreds and a typed note. "Take the deal. Last offer. Your grandmother deserves to rest." She photographed every band of cash, sealed the envelope, and called the local FBI field office to report attempted obstruction and witness intimidation. Then she sat down on the kitchen floor, her back against the refrigerator. For 1 second, her hands shook. Then she stood up. She arrived at the hospital at 11 that night. Eleanor Hastings was still in the ICU, the bandages smaller now, her eyes still closed. Jasmine took the chair beside the bed and began to talk, quietly, about Canon 3E, about the way Caldwell's hand had settled flat on the bench, about Whitfield's smile. She talked for a long time. And then, mid-sentence about the 10K filing, Eleanor's hand closed around Jasmine's. Jasmine stopped. Eleanor's eyes opened a sliver. The pupils swam, then focused. Her lips moved. The voice that came out was barely a voice, the rasp of a woman whose throat had been intubated for 9 days. "Doris," she said. Jasmine leaned closer. Records office, basement, box marked pending.
Not pending, hidden. Your daddy, he knew.
Then her eyes closed again. Her hand relaxed. But her grip, just before letting go, had tightened. Once. Like someone making sure she had been heard. The records office opened at 7:30 a.m. Jasmine was waiting outside when the door was unlocked. She had not slept or changed clothes. She walked in and stopped at the front counter. Behind it stood a woman in her late 60s, gray hair in a low bun, reading glasses on a chain around her neck, a name tag that read D. Anderson, County Recorder. The woman looked up. The moment she saw Jasmine's face, recognition passed across her own. The recognition of someone who had been waiting for a particular person to walk through that door for 12 years. She set down the file she was holding. "You're Theo Brooks's girl." "Yes, ma'am." Doris Anderson took off her reading glasses and wiped them with the hem of her cardigan, slowly, the way a person does when they need to do something with their hands. "What's your name, baby?" "Jasmine. Your daddy came in here a month before he died. He asked me a question. I told him no." Her voice did not shake, but it slowed. "I had 2 boys in college, baby. My husband had just lost his job at the lumber mill. I was 60 days from losing my house, and Theo Brooks walked in and asked me to risk all of it for strangers I did not know, against a system that would chew me up before sundown." She put the glasses back on. "2 weeks later, your father was dead. They said his heart gave out. I have been telling myself the same lie ever since." A pause. "I am tired of telling that lie." She took a ring of keys from the wall and walked to a steel door marked Staff Only, Archive. "Come with me. There's a box I should have given your daddy a long time ago." The basement was concrete and fluorescent. Doris led her past steel shelving to a stack of banker's boxes covered in dust. She pulled out the bottom one, label across the side, "Pending, do not process." She set it on a folding table. "Open it." Jasmine did. Inside were dozens of land transfer documents going back 20 years. Forged signatures, mismatched notarizations, instructions on county letterhead signed by the previous county clerk, a man now on a 6-figure salary at Halverson, to shelve indefinitely. On top of the stack, separated by a manila divider, was one folder. Jasmine recognized the handwriting on the label immediately. Her father's careful capital letters. Brooks. Keep until she comes. A clock on the wall above the door read 8:22 a.m. Court resumed in 38 minutes. Jasmine entered the courtroom at 8:58 a.m. with the pending do not process box over her shoulder and her father's briefcase in her hand. The gallery was twice as full as the day before. Word had traveled. 2 state-level reporters now sat among the locals. The 4 older black neighbors had been joined by 12 more, strangers to Jasmine but not to one another. 3 rows of quiet faces. At 8:59 a.m., a man in a charcoal suit slipped through the back doors without speaking to anyone. He sat down in the last row, on the aisle, and opened a black leather folder. He did not look up. Caldwell did not see him. Court was called to order. Whitfield asked for a brief continuance to draft the seizure order. Caldwell denied it crisply. He wanted this over by lunch. "Counsel for the defense. Any further witnesses?" Jasmine stood. "The defense calls Doris Anderson, County Recorder." Whitfield was on his feet. "Your Honor, Mrs. Anderson is not on the witness list. The state cannot be ambushed. The witness is being called for impeachment of public records," Jasmine said. "Permitted under California Evidence Code Section 780, subsection I." Caldwell hesitated. He looked at Whitfield. He looked at Doris Anderson, sitting calmly in the 3rd row, hands folded. She did not look dangerous. She looked like somebody's grandmother. "Overruled. The witness may testify." briefly. It was the last ruling in his favor he would ever make from that bench. Doris was sworn in. Whitfield watched her like a man trying to remember if he had left the stove on. Jasmine walked her through it. The labeled box, the instructions on county letterhead, the signatures of the previous county clerk, the 43 pending files that were not pending at all. When she finished, Doris turned in her chair. She faced the gallery. Not the judge, not Jasmine. The gallery. The black families in the third and fourth rows. The reporters. "I am sorry," she said. Her voice did not shake. "I am so sorry." She did not cry. She turned back and waited for the next question. Whitfield was already on his feet. "Your Honor, this evidence was not disclosed in discovery. We move to exclude all of it." "This evidence," Jasmine said, "was not in defense possession until 8:14 this morning, when the county recorder's office made it available for the first time in 12 years. The defense requests that the court take judicial notice. These are public records under Evidence Code Section 452. Caldwell did not rule. He stalled. His eyes flicked toward Whitfield, who stared back, very still. Then Jasmine reached into her bag and pulled out the second folder. She did not raise her voice. She simply spoke. "Your Honor, the defense additionally moves for the recusal of the presiding judge under Canon 3E. Specifically, over the past 3 years, Halverson Development Group has wired $4.2 million to a Nevada company named Ridgecrest Heritage Trust. The sole beneficiary of that trust is Margaret Caldwell, the wife of the presiding judge. Each transfer landed within 30 days of a ruling this court issued in favor of Halverson." The courtroom went silent for the second time in 2 days. This silence was different. The first had been the silence of surprise. This one was the silence of a building that has just heard the foundation crack. A reporter in the second row whispered, audibly, "Oh my God." Caldwell's face went red. You are out of order, counsel. I will have you held in contempt before you finish that sentence. Bailiff." "Your Honor." Jasmine did not move. "Threatening contempt to silence a properly filed recusal motion is itself misconduct under Canon 2A. The record will reflect that threat." Caldwell opened his mouth. "And the record will also reflect," Jasmine continued in the same flat voice, "that as of 9:06 this morning, the California Attorney General's Public Integrity Division is in possession of every document I have just referenced. Wire transfers, corporate filings, trust beneficiary records, case dockets." A pause. "Including the names of every parcel transferred under this scheme over the past 19 years. The man in the charcoal suit at the back of the courtroom stood up. Caldwell saw him. Whatever color had been left in Caldwell's face left it. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. 2 United States Marshals walked in. The lead marshal, a woman in her 40s, federal badge at her belt, a sealed manila envelope in her hand, walked down the center aisle and handed the envelope up to Caldwell. She did not speak. Caldwell did not open it. He stared at the envelope on the wood in front of him. Jasmine remained standing at the defense table. She did not gloat. She did not raise her voice. She lifted her chin once, the way she had on the morning of the first hearing, and she spoke very quietly. "Your Honor, on the first day of this proceeding, you stated on the record that if I won this case, you would resign from this bench tomorrow morning. The defense respectfully requests that the court take judicial notice of its own statement." The reporter in the second row, the same one as before, whispered, "Oh my God." The gavel did not come down. It would not come down again. By that afternoon, an emergency replacement judge had been assigned from the appellate division. Her name was Judge Helena Carrington, 22 years on the bench, known for refusing lunch meetings with anyone who had business before her court. 48 hours after the showdown, Judge Carrington issued her ruling. Halverson Development Group v. Brooks was dismissed, with prejudice. The eminent domain petition was denied in its entirety. Pearl Brooks's title to 1402 Honey Ridge Road was quieted in court order. The protected historical residential status of the entire Honey Ridge Road block was restored. Within the same week, Harold Caldwell was suspended without pay, pending investigation by the California Commission on Judicial Performance. Halverson Development Group was referred to a federal grand jury for indictment under federal wire fraud, civil rights, and conspiracy statutes. The Ridgecrest Heritage Trust accounts were frozen by federal court order. Margaret Caldwell received her first subpoena 10 days later. The previous county clerk, the one drawing the six-figure Halverson salary, checked himself into a hospital for an undisclosed condition and disappeared from public view. Outside the courtroom, in the hallway, with its old marble floor and its tall windows, Bradford Whitfield walked up to Jasmine. He did not smirk. He stopped about 4 feet from her and waited until she looked up. "Ms. Brooks," he said. "Mr. Whitfield." There was a long moment. He put his hands in his pockets. He looked at the marble floor. Then he looked at her. "In 20 years of practice, 20 years, that was the best lawyering I have ever seen. I am sorry for what was said in that room yesterday. I am sorry for every objection I made today that you knew, before I made it, would be sustained for the wrong reason." He extended his hand. Jasmine shook it. Brief, polite. Once. She did not smile. She did not crow. She said only, "Have a good afternoon, Mr. Whitfield." And she walked past him. 3 feet behind her, Doris Anderson, still in her cardigan, still in her sensible shoes, was hugging Pearl Brooks against the wall outside the courtroom. Pearl held the older woman tight, both of them crying without sound. "It's all right now, honey," Pearl said into Doris's shoulder. "It is all right now." By the time Jasmine pushed open the courthouse doors, the front steps were filled with cameras. She did not stop. She did not make a speech. She walked down the steps with Pearl on her arm, past the lights, past the microphones, toward the curb. 3 women were waiting at the curb. They were older. They wore church clothes. One of them was holding a manila folder. "Miss Brooks," the one with the folder said. "Cedar County. They took my mama's land in '04. There were 46 families on our block. 6 now. I drove 3 hours. Will you look at my papers?" Behind her, a second woman stepped forward, holding her own folder. "I'm from Sutton County." A third. "Mine is from up in Mendocino." Jasmine looked at the 3 of them, then back at the cameras, at the reporters who were now turning toward this conversation instead of away from it. She reached into the pocket of her father's old briefcase and pulled out a small stack of business cards she had printed at the public library 2 days earlier. She gave one to every woman at the curb. Across town, in a hospital room with the television tuned low, Eleanor Hastings opened her eyes a little wider than she had in 9 days and watched a young woman she had known since the day she was born walk down the courthouse steps. She smiled, slowly. She did not need to say anything. That evening, just before sunset, Pearl Brooks and her granddaughter walked back up the porch at 1402 Honey Ridge Road. The peach tree was still standing. The grass was still long where Pearl had dropped the hose 2 weeks earlier. The porch swing creaked the way it had always creaked, in the same place. They sat on the top step. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Pearl reached over and patted her granddaughter's knee. "You favor him today," she said. "Your daddy. The way you walk." Jasmine did not answer. The sun went down behind the oak trees. The light on the porch changed from gold to lavender to gray. A breeze moved through the leaves of the peach tree. Somewhere down the block, a car door closed. Somewhere else, a dog barked once. Pearl held her granddaughter's hand. They watched the day end. 3 months later, A small storefront opened across the street from the county courthouse. It had been a dry cleaner for 40 years. The sign in the window had been painted over twice. The new sign, hand-lettered on the front glass, was simple. Theodore Brooks Legal Aid Project. Free representation for elderly homeowners, eminent domain, title disputes, wrongful transfers. Inside, behind a second-hand desk, Jasmine Brooks was sitting in a slightly better blazer than the one she had worn that first morning in court. Across from her sat a woman in her 70s, white hair, tired eyes, holding a folder she had carried in herself. Jasmine did not interrupt her. She did not make promises. She did not tell her what to expect. She just listened. On the small television in the corner, a news chyron scrolled past at the bottom of the screen. Former Judge Harold Caldwell indicted on 14 federal counts. Jury selection set for next month. Jasmine did not look up at it. She kept her eyes on the woman in front of her. The woman kept talking.
I told you this story for one reason. For every Jasmine the world finally hears, 10 more get told to sit down because of their skin. Talent doesn't disappear when no one is looking. It waits. And sometimes, it walks into a courtroom and refuses to leave.
If this story moved you, do one small thing tonight. Don't scroll past. Tell somebody about it. Maybe somebody in your own life. A niece, a coworker, a kid in your neighborhood who keeps getting laughed at before anyone asks her name. See her. Hear him. And the next time you watch someone in power roll their eyes before a young person can speak, remember the courtroom that went silent for a reason. If you want more stories like this one,
Real ones, hard ones, ones that take a long time to win, hit like. Share this with somebody who needs it tonight. Subscribe so the next one finds you. Somewhere out there, another girl has a folder of papers and nobody willing to take them seriously. Maybe, because of you, she will not give up tonight. Maybe she will be the next one to stand up. The light in Jasmine Brooks's office stayed on long after the rest of the street went dark.